My ex thought my black card was his unlimited ticket to a better life. Without telling me, he used it to fund a lavish wedding to another woman. The string quartet was tuning when I came through the gates of Hallowell Ridge, and that sound, that thin, searching whine before four instruments agree on a note, was the exact sound my chest had been making since Monday. It was 9:52 on Saturday morning. Ceremony at 4. The lawn had been mowed in stripes. Somebody had spent an hour that morning steaming 300 linen napkins into little folded shells, and I could see them from the driveway, glowing white under the tent like teeth. I didn't wear white. I'm not a psychopath. I wore the gray suit I keep for board meetings and funerals because they require the same face. I wasn't there to scream. I want to be clear about that because people always assume the woman shows up to scream. I was there because Rachel Monroe told me the process server needed someone who could identify Ethan Cole on site in a crowd of 300 people, half of whom would be wearing the same navy suit he was. And because at 10:15 I had a meeting with the estate's general manager about a question nobody had asked out loud yet. Who exactly was paying for all of this? The valet reached for my door and I told him I'd park myself. I sat there for a second with my hands on the wheel of a rental Camry. I'd left the Jaguar in the city because the Jaguar was already in enough photographs, and I watched a florist's van back up to the tent. Two women unloaded buckets of white peonies. Peonies aren't in season in October. Peonies in October cost the way a small used car costs. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. Monday, my hands had shaken so hard in that conference room I'd had to put them under the table. By Saturday, something in me had gone very quiet and very cold, the way water does right before it turns to ice. I got out of the car. I should tell you about the card because everybody hears black card and pictures something it isn't. I didn't come from money. My father was a regional foods distributor in Utica who kept a green ledger book on the kitchen table for 31 years, and every Sunday night he entered the week by hand even after he had a computer, because he said a number you write yourself is a number you can't lie to. He died the year I turned 26. I still have the last ledger. The final entry is in his handwriting and it's for 1840, groceries, and it kills me every time. I started Bennett Event Systems in the spare bedroom of a one-bedroom in Astoria, with $6,000 and a used monitor. We build the payment and reconciliation layer for luxury hotels, the boring invisible machinery that lets a Four Seasons in one country close out a wedding weekend booked in another currency without three people fighting on the phone about a corkage fee. It's not glamorous. It is extremely lucrative because nobody else wants to do it. By year 6, we had 41 employees and an office on West 26th. By year 8, we were processing enough volume that the card came in the mail with no application, just a letter, and I laughed at it, and then I cried a little, and then I called my mother. Ethan came a year after that. He was charming in the specific way that's hard to describe later without sounding stupid. He remembered things. Not big things. Small ones. That I hate the smell of lilies. That my left knee aches before rain. He'd text me a photograph of a bodega cat at 11 p.m. with no caption, and it would be the nicest thing that happened to me that day. I travel 3 weeks a month. That's the part people don't factor in. When you're in Zurich and Doha and Miami and your apartment is a place you visit, a person who is willing to be there, to meet the plumber, to take the dog to the vet, to be the emergency contact, that person becomes infrastructure. I added him as an authorized user in the fall of our first year, after a canceled flight in Lisbon and a hotel that wouldn't take his debit card. It felt practical. It felt like adulthood. For 2 years, he used it exactly the way you'd want. Groceries. Flights when he came with me. A $220 charge at a hardware store in Kingston that turned out to be a bookshelf he built for my office and never mentioned. I want that on the record too, because the ugly parts are coming, and I don't want to pretend I was a fool for a stranger. I wasn't. I was a fool for someone who was good at it for a long time first. Gregory Hale met me under the portico at 10:14. 22 years in hospitality, the last 9 at Hallowell Ridge. Silver hair cut close, glasses on a cord, the tight, courteous stillness of a man who has watched a lot of rich people behave badly, and long ago stopped being surprised. He shook my hand and said, "Ms. Bennett, I've read your counsel's letter 4 times, and I've been in this business long enough to know when a room is about to become a problem." He looked out at the tent. Someone was clipping a microphone to a lectern. "Would you walk with me?" We walked. He talked in numbers, which I appreciated, because numbers are the language I actually speak. The estate had been paid a $40,000 deposit in June on the platinum package. The balance, $118,000, had been guaranteed by the card on file. That guarantee had been withdrawn Friday at 11:07 a.m. by the issuer's fraud division. When a guarantee is pulled, our standard is to require certified funds before service, he said. Friday afternoon, I sent that notice to the contract holder. I received a reply at 6:40 p.m. He handed me a printout. He'd brought a printout. I could have kissed him. Greg, bank error. Being resolved this weekend. My fiance's family is covering the balance regardless. We've been over this. Please stop emailing my planner. E. Cole. Was that true? I asked. The family covering it. Hale's mouth moved about a millimeter. Mr. Kane called me at 7:15 this morning to ask what I was talking about. Douglas Kane, Vanessa's father, retired orthodontist, Ridgewood, New Jersey. Until 7:15 that morning, a man who thought he was about to have a very good day. He's here, Hale said. He's in the library. He's been in the library for an hour and 40 minutes and he hasn't ordered anything. A pause. I don't insert myself into families, but I'd note that he asked me a question I couldn't answer. What question? He asked whether Bennett Event Systems is a real company. Something moved in me then. Not anger yet. Something colder and further down, in the part of me that keeps a green ledger. Why would he ask that? Hale took his glasses off and let them hang. You should ask him. The library at Hallowell Ridge is all dark wood and books nobody reads. And Douglas Kane was sitting in a leather chair by the window, with a manila folder on his knees, in a tuxedo, at 10:30 in the morning, 4.5 hours early for his own daughter's wedding. He was 68. He had the ruddy, pleasant, slightly baffled face of a man who has been well-liked his entire life. When he stood up, he did it in stages. You're her, he said. Claire Bennett, Doug. He shook my hand and then looked at his own hand like it had done something without permission. I want to say up front, I don't know what's happening. Neither did I on Monday. He sat back down. He opened the folder and laid 3 things on the table between us. And I looked at them, and the room went slightly sideways. A subscription agreement. Bennett Event Systems, Inc. Series A preferred shares. $400,000. Signed in February. A capitalization table, printed on what appeared to be my company's letterhead, showing Douglas and Marianne Kane holding 2.1%. And a wire confirmation. February 19th. $400,000 from a Wells Fargo account in Ridgewood to an account at a credit union in Yonkers, in the name of BES Growth Holdings, LLC. There is no BES Growth Holdings, LLC. There is no Series A. I have never sold a share of my company to anyone. I have turned down 4 term sheets, twice at dinners where I had to smile afterward. I read the signature line. My name, in that same looping electronic script from the invoices, the one I'd first seen on Priya's tablet 5 days earlier, and would later learn had been lifted from a PDF of a charity auction pledge form Ethan had watched me sign at a table in Tribeca. Mr. Kane, I said. My voice came out very level. Do you know what a forgery is? He didn't cry. I want to be fair to him. He put his hand over his mouth and held it there for about 20 seconds and breathed through his nose. And when he took the hand away, he said, my wife bought a dress. I've thought about that sentence more than almost anything else from that day. $400,000 gone, and the first thing that surfaced was his wife's dress. That's what people actually break over, not the number. The small, dumb, hopeful thing attached to it. Does Vanessa know? His eyes came up fast. Vanessa is my daughter. That's not an answer. She's my daughter, he said again, and I let it go, because I already had a bad feeling, and I didn't want to be right in front of him. Here's what I hadn't known when I walked in that morning. The $347th, $860 was the part you could see, the part that photographs well, the champagne and the band and the peonies. Underneath it was the actual machine. Priya Raghunathan has been my controller for 5 years. She has an accounting degree from Baruch and a personality like a bank vault door, and on Wednesday I'd asked her one question. If he had our vendor portal, what else did he touch? She'd come back Thursday night with a list. On Friday, she brought in Nadia Okonkwo, CFE, 11 years in forensic accounting, 3 of them at the State Attorney General's office, because the list had stopped being a list and started being a shape. BS Growth Holdings LLC was registered in Delaware in November. The registered agent's mailing address was a UPS store in White Plains. The operating agreement named Ethan Cole as sole managing member and described the entity as the growth stage investment vehicle of Bennett Event Systems, Inc. That entity had received $400,000 from the Kanes in February. It had received $85,000 from a man named Ronald Pell in Ohio in December. It had received $60,000 from a couple in Scarsdale in March. $545,000 from 4 people who all thought they had bought a piece of the company I built in a spare bedroom in Astoria. And on Wednesday of that week, 3 days before the wedding, 2 days after Priya slid her tablet across the conference table, that entity had applied for a $2.1 million asset-based bridge loan from Corvidae Capital Partners, secured against Bennett Event Systems receivables, under a corporate guarantee bearing my signature and a notary stamp. Scheduled to fund Monday at 9 a.m. Nadia called me Friday night while I was packing. She has a very calm voice. She used it. Claire, I need you to understand the exposure. If that loan funds, there is a perfected lien against your receivables filed in Delaware, even after you prove fraud, and you will, that filing exists. It shows on a lien search. And you have an acquisition, I said. I have an acquisition. Ardent Hospitality Group, 22 months of conversations. A definitive agreement scheduled for signature on the 3rd of November. And in Section 411, in language I had personally negotiated down from something worse, a representation that there were no undisclosed liens, encumbrances, or capital raises against the company. Nadia was quiet for a second. Then he isn't stealing from you, she said. He's stealing your company's ability to be sold. Those are different crimes, and only one of them ends you. I sat down on the edge of my bed with a folded blouse in my hand and did not move for a long time. $347,860 was a wedding. $2.1 million was a fuse. And I had until Monday at 9. I told myself on the drive up Saturday morning that I would stay outside, that I would let the process server do his job and Hale do his, and that I would sit in the rental car with a coffee and feel nothing. I made it until 11:40. That's when I saw the necklace. Vanessa came out of the carriage house in a silk robe with rollers in her hair, holding an iced coffee, laughing at something a bridesmaid said. And around her neck, at 11:40 in the morning, Vanessa came out of the carriage house in a silk robe with rollers in her hair, holding an iced coffee, laughing at something a bridesmaid said. And around her neck, at 11:40 in the morning, over a bathrobe, because some people can't wait, the emerald. Vintage Colombian stone, platinum setting, purchased June 14th from a dealer on East 61st, $71 $200, charged to my account while I was in a conference room in Singapore explaining our reconciliation architecture to a room of hotel CFOs. I'd noticed that charge in June. I'd asked him about it. He'd told me it was a deposit on an engagement ring. He'd let me be happy about it. For 11 days, until the messages, I had walked around a little lit up, thinking about a man who was quietly planning something. And he was. He absolutely was. My stomach dropped so fast I had to put a hand on the hood of the car. The metal was warm. I remember that. I remember thinking, very clearly and stupidly, the car is warm and my hands are cold, and this is what it feels like when your body finds out before your brain does. A woman with a clipboard asked if I was all right. Allergies, I said. The peonies. She said, aren't they gorgeous? At 12:20, Ethan's mother found me. Diane Cole is 63 and has a way of touching your forearm while she says something unforgivable, so that later you can't decide whether it happened. Claire. Warm. Delighted. Like we'd run into each other at a farmer's market. I knew you'd come. I said to Ethan, Claire is bigger than this. Diane. He's been so worried you'd do something. Squeeze on the forearm. I told him she wouldn't. Not today. Not to Vanessa's family. They're lovely people. They are, I said. I met Doug this morning. Her smile didn't move, but something behind it did. The way a curtain moves when a window's open in another room. You should know, I said, that Doug is going to have a hard afternoon, and it isn't because of me. Claire, her voice dropped into something confidential and pitying. Money is just, if you say money is just money to me one more time, I'm going to ask you where your son got $400,000. She took her hand off my arm. Ethan says you gave him that card, she said. He says you gave it to him. Do you believe that? And here's the thing. She hesitated. Half a second. A mother's half second, where the whole architecture of a person shows through the drywall. He's my son, she said. That's what Doug said about his daughter, I said. You two should talk. She walked away toward the tent with her shoulders very square, and I watched her go, and I felt the closest thing to sympathy I felt all day, and it lasted maybe 4 seconds. The first vendor left at 1:05, not dramatically. That's the thing nobody understands about how this actually plays out. There's no scene. A man in a polo shirt from Hudson Sound and Light stood by his van talking on the phone for 6 minutes, and then he started coiling cable, and then a second guy came out and started coiling cable, and by 1:20 there was a hole in the tent where the lighting rig had been, and a woman in a headset was walking very fast toward the main house. At 1:35, the 12-piece band's contractor pulled his 2 vans out. He'd been sent the same packet everyone got, the forged sponsorship letter, and one plain sentence from Rachel Monroe saying Bennett Event Systems had never agreed to finance this event, and the signature on the document was stolen. We never told a single vendor to walk. I want that understood. Rachel was explicit about it, twice in writing. We do not induce breach. We disclose facts. We told them the truth and let them decide whether they wanted to work for free. 12 of 19 decided they didn't. The florist stayed. She'd already been paid in cash, and she told me later she'd assumed something was wrong in July when a woman calling herself Nicole from Bennett Event Systems started phoning her about delivery windows from a cell number instead of a company line, and got snippy when the florist asked for a purchase order. Hold on to that, Nicole. At 1:50, the catering captain sat down on the loading dock and put his head in his hands, and Gregory Hale walked out to him with a bottle of water and a check. And that is how I learned Hale had decided, sometime that morning, whose side he was on. At 2:10, Ethan came out of the main house looking for me. I hadn't seen him in 5 days. He looked good. That's the humiliating part. Navy suit, no tie yet, hair freshly cut, that easy, loose-limbed walk. He came across the gravel toward me the way you'd approach a coworker who'd sent an unnecessarily long email. Claire, Ethan, okay. He put his hands on his hips and looked at the sky and did a little laugh. Okay, honestly, this is beneath you. Which part? You know exactly which part. Still smiling. That's a skill. You called my vendors. I called my bank. You humiliated a woman you've never met on her wedding day because you're hurt. And I get it. I do. I hurt you. And I have apologized. He stopped, recalibrated, dropped his voice into the reasonable register. Fix the freeze. Today. And I will pay you back every dollar. On paper. Notarized, whatever you want. I said, notarized by who? He blinked, just once. A quarter-second stall, the buffering wheel of a man realizing the conversation is happening on a floor he can't see. Kevin Doss, I said. Notary commission number 01DO6392871, Bronx County. He notarized a corporate guarantee for $2.1 million on Wednesday with my signature on it. I've never met him. Have you? The smile came off in pieces, not all at once. The eyes first, then the mouth. I went through my company. You logged into my company at 12:41 in the morning from your apartment and you signed my father's name. Bennett. That's his name, Ethan. He wrote it in a ledger every Sunday for 31 years and you typed it into a PDF at midnight in your underwear. His jaw set, and then the mask slipped a little further, and I saw the thing underneath it, and honestly, it was such a small thing. That's what shocked me. I'd expected something monstrous. It was just contempt. Ordinary, bored contempt. Like a man looking at a slow cashier. You have $400 million in enterprise value, he said quietly. Do you know what I had? An apartment I paid for. I had nothing, and you liked it that way. You liked being the Doug Kane is in the library, I said. He stopped talking. I have replayed that moment more times than is healthy. The way his weight shifted onto his back foot, the way his eyes went to the main house and then to the tent, and then to the parking area, checking exits, doing math. He has the subscription agreement, I said. He has the cap table you made. He has the wire confirmation to a credit union in Yonkers. And at some point in the next hour, he's going to walk out here and ask you a question in front of 300 people. And I want you to know that I'm not going to be the one who asks it. I don't have to. That's what I came here to find out. Claire, you should probably go inside. He went inside. At 2:47, a man in a Hallowell Ridge catering vest, holding a tray with nothing on it, walked into the groom's suite and said, Ethan Cole? And Ethan said yes. And the man handed him a folder and said, you've been served, and left. I wasn't in the room. I heard about it from 3 separate people, and all 3 of them independently mentioned the same detail, that he took the folder and looked at it, and then looked up and said, is this a joke? Nobody laughed. The ceremony did not happen at 4 o'clock. At 4:20, the officiant was standing under an arbor of peonies with 300 people in white chairs on a lawn in the Hudson Valley, and there was no music, because the band was gone, and no amplification, because the sound company was gone, and no bride, because Vanessa Kane was in the carriage house with her father. I know what happened in that room because Doug told me 8 months later, over coffee in Ridgewood, in a diner where he ordered nothing and then apologized to the waitress 4 times. He said he showed her the subscription agreement and asked her if she'd known. He said she looked at it for a long time. And then she said, Daddy, it's an investment. It's not gone. It's just illiquid. 68 years old, $400,000 of retirement, and his daughter handed him a word. He said that's when he knew. At 4:52, the guests started leaving. Not all at once. In that awful, drifting way, people standing up in 2s and 3s, checking phones, a man in the 3rd row saying, well, loudly to nobody. I was at the far end of the parking area by then, sitting on the hood of the Camry, watching. I'd like to tell you I felt triumphant. What I actually felt was nauseous. 300 people had driven up here with gifts in their trunks. Somebody's grandmother had a hat. There was a kid, maybe 7, in a tiny suit, spinning in circles on the lawn because nobody was watching him anymore. Every one of them had been brought here as set dressing for a lie, and now they were going to drive 2 hours home and talk about it for a decade. And none of them had done anything wrong. That's what he actually stole. Not from me, from all of them. At 5:30, Gregory Hale came out and stood next to my car, and we watched the tent get taken apart in the blue light. 22 years, he said. I've had a groom arrested. I've had 2 brides call it off at the door. I've never had a wedding just evaporate. I'm sorry. He looked at me like I'd said something absurd. Ms. Bennett, he said, you didn't do this. You just stopped paying for it. I thought Saturday was the end of it. Saturday was the fuse getting shorter. At 8:14 p.m., in a hotel room in Rhinebeck with my shoes off and a room service burger I couldn't eat, my phone rang. Rachel Monroe. Attorney, 16 years, commercial litigation and white collar. The kind of person who says okay in a tone that means Sit down. Okay, she said. I sat down. Corvidae confirmed the loan is still in the queue. Their credit committee cleared it Thursday. Funding instruction is automated. It releases Monday at 9 unless a human stops it. So have a human stop it. I've spoken to their general counsel twice. His position is that they have a facially valid corporate guarantee, a notarized signature, and a borrower of record. He is not going to unilaterally cancel a funded commitment on a Saturday night because opposing counsel called him. And Claire, I don't love it, but I understand him. If he pulls it on my say-so and I'm wrong, he's the one who gets sued. Then what? Then we need a judge. It's Saturday. That's the problem, she said. The other problem is that his passport is in a bag in the Hudson Valley, and there's a Delta flight, JFK to Naples tomorrow at 9:40 p.m., and it's currently the honeymoon leg of a booking he made in June and never canceled. I stood up. I don't know why. Some animal part of me just needed to be vertical. He'll run. He might, and if he's in Italy on Monday morning with a funded 2.1, the recovery picture changes completely. A pause. Papers moving. There's also something else. Nadia flagged it an hour ago. She was reconciling the BES Growth Holdings account, and there's a scheduled outgoing transfer. Sunday night, $940,000 to a correspondent account in Nicosia. $940,000. He didn't have that. Unless. That's the loan, I said. He's already staged the outbound. He's already staged the outbound, Rachel said. The wedding wasn't the plan, Claire. The wedding was the cover. You don't throw a 300-person wedding as a con. You throw it because it makes you look like a man with a life, at exactly the moment you need 4 families and a credit committee to believe you're a man with a life. I looked at the burger. I looked at my own hands. How long do I have? How long do I have? To assemble a complete emergency application with affidavits, exhibits, a memorandum of law, and a proposed order to show cause with a temporary restraining order, and find a Supreme Court justice willing to sign it on a Sunday. Rachel exhaled. 36 hours. Call it 32 if we want the lender to have it in hand before their systems wake up. Okay. Claire, you should also know I'll be waking up a lot of people tonight and some of them are going to say no. Rachel, yeah, he put my father's name on a $2 million lien, I said. Wake everybody up. I did not sleep Saturday night. I want to describe what that was actually like, because I've read 100 stories where somebody says, it was a long night, and moves on, and it does the reader a disservice. At 11 p.m., I was on a conference line with Rachel, Priya, and Nadia, and my laptop was on the hotel desk on top of a stack of towels because the desk was too low and my neck had started doing something. At 12:30 a.m., Rachel emailed me a draft affidavit, 41 paragraphs, and I read it and found 2 things that were wrong: a date and a characterization of the April conversation that was slightly more favorable to me than the truth, and I made her fix both. She argued about the second one for 4 minutes. I said, if one sentence in this is shaded, a judge who's tired and annoyed gets to disbelieve all of it. She stopped arguing. At 1:15 a.m., Priya was still in the office on West 26th, alone, pulling deposit records. She sent me a photo of her desk, 2 monitors, a bag of pretzels, and a post-it that said, do not redact anything. I don't know who she wrote it for. Herself, probably. At 2:04 a.m., I threw up in the hotel bathroom, quietly, holding my own hair like a college student, and then rinsed my mouth and went back to the laptop. At 2:40 a.m., Tobias Lynn called from Kestrel Forensics. Incident response lead, former Army 35T, the kind of man who apologizes for the delay and then hands you something that ends a person's life. I have the token logs, he said. Your IT killed the account September 19th. The archive service kept honoring a legacy service token because the deprovisioning script only walked the primary directory. That's on your vendor, and we'll deal with that later, but here's what matters. The token doesn't just log the access. It logs the device. Meaning I can tell you the uploads at 12:41 a.m. came from a MacBook Pro, serial number ending 4KQ7, on a residential Spectrum IP allocated to a building on East 84th. And I can tell you the same device authenticated to your archive 11 other times between January and September. A pause, and I heard him do something on a keyboard. Ms. Bennett, the first access is January 8th. January 8th. In April, I found messages and he cried on my kitchen floor and said it started in February. He'd been inside my company since the first week of January, before the affair, before any of it. The girlfriend wasn't the beginning of the theft. The theft was the beginning of the girlfriend. I remember standing up. I remember the room being very bright. I remember thinking, absurdly, about the bookshelf he built for my office, and doing the arithmetic on when he'd built it, and getting an answer I didn't like. Ms. Bennett, send it to Rachel Monroe. I said. All of it. Chain of custody, hashes, everything. Exactly how you'd send it if you were going to have to defend it on a stand. That's how I always send it, he said, and I could hear that he was being kind. At 4:50 a.m., Kevin Doss called us. That one I didn't expect. Rachel had left him a voicemail at 11 the night before. Not threatening, just factual the way she does it. I'm calling about a notarization on your journal from Wednesday, and I want you to understand that this is going to be looked at very closely, and it will go better for you if the first version anyone hears is yours. He called back at 10 to 5 in the morning. He was 34. He notarized documents at a check cashing place on Fordham Road for $15 a signature. He said a man came in Wednesday with a woman. He said the man had a driver's license in his own name and said his business partner was already downstairs in the car with a cold and could he just bring the page down. He said the woman told him it was fine. He said she was very put together, very warm, and she'd shown him a phone with a photo of the three of them at some kind of party, and she'd said, "She's such a stickler, she'll be so annoyed if we're late." He said he took the page downstairs and came back up and stamped it and never saw anybody in a car. He said, "I have a kid. I need you to know I didn't think. I've done 4,000 of these. Nobody's ever." Rachel said, "Mr. E. Doss, I need you to say all of that again to someone with a badge today, and I need you to not delete anything on your phone." He said, "Okay." He was crying. $15. And I sat there in a hotel room in Rhinebeck at 5 in the morning with my head against the wall thinking, the woman. Sunday moved like a car accident, slow and then extremely fast. 7:30 a.m. Rachel reached Justice Elena Farrow's part clerk through the emergency application procedure. Signed, notarized affidavits from me, Priya, Nadia, Tobias, and Doug Kane. 22 exhibits. Exhibit D was the corporate guarantee. Exhibit L was the token log. Exhibit R was the scheduled outbound wire to Nicosia. And Rachel told me later that Exhibit R was the one that did it, because a judge can debate whether a signature is real, but nobody has to think very hard about $940,000 leaving the country the night before a loan funds. 10:40 a.m. Doug Kane signed his affidavit at a Staples in Paramus. He'd driven there in the tuxedo pants. He told Rachel he hadn't gone home yet. 12:15 p.m. Detective Angela Reyes, NYPD Financial Crimes Task Force, 19 years, called me from what sounded like a parking lot. She'd caught the complaint Friday and had been sitting on it as a paper case. Then she got Tobias's package. "Ms. Bennett, I'm going to ask you something, and I need a straight answer. Do you have any interest in this ending with him paying you back and everybody going home?" "No." "Say why." "Because he'll do it again," I said. "And next time it'll be somebody who can't survive it." Doug Kane is 68. She was quiet for a second. Then, "Okay, that's the right answer." And I ask because half the complainants I get change their mind at hour 40. And I end up looking like an idiot in front of a bureau chief. "I won't change my mind. I believe you," she said. "Stay off the phone with him. If he calls, don't pick up and screenshot the call log." 2:50 p.m. Justice Farrow signed the order to show cause with a temporary restraining order. Corvidae Capital Partners was restrained from funding. BES Growth Holdings account was frozen. Ethan Cole was restrained from transferring, encumbering, or dissipating any asset traceable to Bennett Event Systems. Rachel called me from the courthouse steps and said one word: "Signed." I made a noise I've never made before or since. 3:40 p.m. Corvidae's general counsel confirmed receipt and stood the funding down. He was extremely polite. He was also, I found out much later, the person who called Detective Reyes's supervisor to say his credit committee wanted to be treated as a victim and not a defendant, which is the sound a lender makes when it realizes it almost wired $2 million to a man in a rented tuxedo. 6:10 p.m. Ethan's phone pinged a tower in Queens. I was in the back of a car on the Taconic. Rachel was on speaker. Detective Reyes had told her he'd been served the TRO at 5:15 at his mother's house in Larchmont. He still has the booking, Rachel said. 9:40 out of JFK. Can he leave? The TRO restrains assets. It doesn't restrain a body. There's no warrant yet. A pause. Claire, if he boards, he isn't fleeing a criminal charge, because there isn't one yet. He's just a guy on a flight. An extradition on a paper case from Italy is a 2-year project on a good day. I looked out the window at trees going by at 70 miles an hour. Then get a charge, I said. That is not a thing I can just... Rachel, he forged a notarized instrument. He accessed a computer system without authorization. He wired money across state lines under a false entity. Which one of those is fastest? Silence. Papers. Reyes has been building an arrest package since noon, Rachel said slowly. She told me it was Tuesday work. Tell her it's a 2-hour project. I can't tell a detective. Then tell her about the flight, I said. Just the flight. She'll do the rest. She hung up. I watched the sun go down over the Hudson and did not feel a single thing. They took him at gate B22 at 8:51 p.m., 39 minutes before boarding, on a warrant for forgery in the second degree and unauthorized use of a computer. Detective Reyes called me at 9:20. She said he had a rolling carry-on, a garment bag, $9,400 in cash and a shaving kit, and a printed itinerary for a villa outside Sorrento booked for 11 nights. She said he asked whether he could still make the flight. Not a lawyer. Not his mother. The flight. They always ask something that tells you exactly who they are, Reyes said. Get some sleep, Ms. Bennett. I didn't, but I appreciated the suggestion. The thing that finished it came from Gregory Hale 11 days later, in an email with no subject line. Hallowell Ridge records its reservations line. There's a beep and a notice, the way there is everywhere. And nobody hears it because nobody ever hears it. Hale had gone back through 18 months of audio because his own insurer asked him to. He sent me one file, 4 minutes and 6 seconds, July 22nd. A woman's voice, bright and organized, working through a delivery schedule with the estate's events coordinator. Cool-headed, charming, good at it. This is Nicole. I'm the executive assistant over at Bennett Event Systems. I'm calling on the Cole event. Yes, Ms. Bennett's asked me to handle everything from here. She's traveling. Any invoicing should route through me directly, not through her office. She's very particular about that. I'd heard that voice 4 days earlier, laughing on a lawn in a silk robe with rollers in her hair and my emerald around her neck. There was no Nicole. She wasn't a woman who got tricked by a man. She was on the phone in July, building the wall between me and my own money, and she was good at it. And she was so confident it would never be replayed that she used her own voice. I sat at my kitchen table and listened to it 11 times. On the 9th, I noticed something at the 2-minute mark. A man's voice in the background, muffled, saying, "Tell her the wire's already out." I forwarded it to Rachel, Reyes, and Nadia at 11:52 p.m. with one line, "Play this at 2:04. Consequences, since that's what you came for." Ethan Cole was indicted on 9 counts. He pled guilty in April to grand larceny in the 2nd degree, forgery in the 2nd degree, and identity theft in the 1st, and took 4 to 12 years at Fishkill, plus restitution of $1,038,400. He'll be paying that at $9 an hour for a very long time. Vanessa Kane was charged as a co-conspirator. She took a cooperation deal, 16 months, 5 years probation, and a permanent bar from any fiduciary or licensed financial role. Her lawyer argued she'd been manipulated. Then the people played 4 minutes and 6 seconds of audio, and her lawyer stopped arguing that. Doug and Marianne Kane recovered $310,000 through the frozen account and the civil settlement. Doug sent me a card at Christmas. It said, "Thank you for the worst day of my life." I understood exactly what he meant. Kevin Doss surrendered his commission and testified. Nobody charged him. He asked Rachel afterward if he could go back to work, and she said yes, and he cried again. It said, "Thank you for the worst day of my life." I understood exactly what he meant. Kevin Doss surrendered his commission and testified. Nobody charged him. He asked Rachel afterward if he could go back to work, and she said yes, and he cried again. Diane Cole has never spoken to me. She wrote a letter to the sentencing judge describing her son as a young man who made financial mistakes while under emotional strain. The judge read it aloud, and then read aloud the January 8th access log, and said, "Ms. Cole, these 2 documents cannot both be true. The Ardent Hospitality Group deal closed on November 3rd, on time. Section 411 held because there was no lien, because a woman named Elena Farrow signed an order on a Sunday afternoon. I got the emerald back in a plastic evidence bag with a barcode on it. I sold it and gave the money to a legal aid fund in Utica that helps people fight fraud they can't afford to fight. My father would have entered it in the ledger. I entered it in mine. 14 months later, I worked an event at Hallowell Ridge, a client's conference on 400 hoteliers, and my company's software running the whole back end of it, which is a joke I enjoy more than I should. Gregory Hale met me under the same portico. He'd gotten a dog. He showed me 11 photos. We walked out to where the tent had been. Just grass now, mowed in stripes. He asked me if I ever wondered what would have happened if I hadn't come up that Saturday, if I'd stayed in the city and let the lawyers handle it and never gotten out of the car. I told him the truth. He'd have made the flight. Everybody asks what the hardest part was. They expect me to say the money, or the wedding website, or the moment in the conference room with 12 people watching my face. It wasn't. It was January 8th, because the money was just money, and the wedding was just theater. But January 8th meant that every good thing after it had been staged. The bodega cat photos, the bookshelf, the plumber, the knee that ached before rain. He hadn't fallen out of love with me and gotten greedy. He'd built a version of a man who loved me because that version had a key. He signed my name 400 times before it mattered. He never once learned how to write his own.